On November 14, 1967, at 11:31 p.m., a woman walked out of a recording studio on Vine Street in Hollywood, California. The studio was called Western Recorders, located at 6000 Sunset Boulevard, a beige stucco building with double glass doors and a parking lot that held 14 cars. At 11:31 p.m., the parking lot held 3. None of them belonged to her. Her name was Nancy Sinatra. She was 27 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, approximately 125 pounds. She wore a cream-colored blouse with a wide collar, dark fitted trousers, and a pair of white go-go boots with a 2-inch heel and a side zipper that had been manufactured by the Herbert Levine Company in New York. Those boots had sold 4 million pairs since her single had hit #1 in February of 1966. The song was "These Boots Are Made for Walking." It had been recorded in this same building, in Studio 3, 11 months before she was standing outside it. Tonight she had spent 10 hours recording overdubs for a track that would never be released. The session ended at 11:28 p.m. Her driver, a man named Eddie who had worked for her father for 9 years, was not outside. He was supposed to arrive at 11 p.m. She waited 3 minutes. She checked the street. No headlights, no engine idling. The temperature was 58 degrees Fahrenheit. A light Santa Ana wind came from the northeast at 4 miles per hour. Vine Street was quiet. 2 streetlights were working. One was not. The broken one was 60 feet ahead of her, midway between the studio door and the intersection of Sunset Boulevard, which was approximately 600 feet north. Nancy Sinatra made a decision. She would walk 3 blocks north to Sunset Boulevard, turn left, and find a payphone at the gas station on the corner of Sunset and Cahuenga. She had a dime in her left trouser pocket. She began walking. Her boots clicked on the sidewalk at a consistent rhythm. Each step covered approximately 26 inches. Her pace was roughly 3 miles per hour. The sound of the boots on concrete was distinct, a sharp tap followed by a softer secondary sound as her heel settled. In the silence of Vine Street at 11:31 p.m., each step was audible from 40 feet away. 400 feet behind her, 2 men exited a bar called the Rain Check Room on the east side of Vine. Man 1 was 5 feet 11 inches tall, approximately 180 pounds, wearing a brown leather jacket, dark jeans and work boots. Man 2 was 6 feet tall, approximately 190 pounds, wearing a grey sweatshirt and tennis shoes. They had been inside the bar for approximately 2 hours. They turned north on Vine Street. They began walking. Man 1 walked on the sidewalk. Man 2 walked in the street, offset by 6 feet. The gap between them was deliberate. It was a formation, not a Prince Cheery formation, not a trained formation, but it was a formation nonetheless, the kind that develops when 2 people have done something together before and understand their roles without discussion. They walked faster than Nancy. Their pace was roughly 4 miles per hour. The distance between them and Nancy was closing at approximately 1 foot every 3 seconds. 30 feet behind the 2 men, a third person walked out of a doorway. He had not been in the Rain Check Room. He had been in a small studio 2 doors south, visiting a sound engineer named Tommy, who had been adjusting microphone placement for a martial arts demonstration film that would be shot the following week. The visit had lasted 45 minutes. He exited at 11:33 p.m. His name was Bruce Lee. He was 27 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, 135 pounds, with approximately 4% body fat. He wore a black cotton long-sleeve shirt, black cotton trousers, and flat-soled shoes that made almost no sound on the pavement. His resting heart rate was 58 beats per minute. His reaction time, as measured by 3 separate studies conducted at the University of Washington between 1964 and 1967, was approximately 0.04 seconds. His visual acuity in low-light conditions was above average. He had been training his peripheral vision since the age of 15, a practice taught to him by his Wing Chun teacher IP Man in Hong Kong. Bruce Lee turned north on Vine Street. He saw 3 figures ahead of him, 1 woman walking alone, 2 men walking behind her in a staggered formation. The woman's steps were audible. The men's steps were quieter. The woman did not look behind her. The men did not look behind them. No one looked at Bruce Lee. He did not increase his speed, not yet. He watched. His heart rate remained at 58 beats per minute. His breathing was nasal, slow, approximately 4 breaths per minute. He catalogued the scene the way he catalogued every room, every street, every situation he entered. Distance to the 2 men, 30 feet. Distance from the 2 men to the woman, approximately 50 feet and closing. Distance from the woman to Sunset Boulevard, Approximately 550 feet. Time for the men to close the gap to the woman at their current pace differential. Approximately 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Bruce Lee had 2 minutes and 30 seconds. He kept walking. Nancy Sinatra heard the footsteps behind her for the first time at approximately 11:35 p.m. when she was 380 feet from Sunset Boulevard. She did not turn around. She did not speed up. She did something most people do not do. She listened. She counted the steps. There were 2 distinct patterns, one heavy, one lighter. Neither pattern matched her own rhythm. Both were faster. She adjusted her grip on her handbag, a small cream leather clutch made by Gucci, 7 inches by 4 inches, weighing approximately 12 ounces. She moved it from her right hand to her left. This was not a defensive decision, it was an instinctive one. Her dominant hand was now free. She did not know why her body made this adjustment. Her body knew. The distance between the 2 men and Nancy was now approximately 30 feet. Man 1 had shifted from the center of the sidewalk to the left side, closer to the building walls. Man 2 remained in the street but had angled inward. The formation was tightening. The angle of approach had changed from parallel to converging. Bruce Lee noticed the angle change. He increased his pace. His speed went from 3 miles per hour to approximately 5.5 miles per hour. His steps remained nearly silent. His breathing did not change. His heart rate increased by 4 beats per minute, from 58 to 62. The distance between Bruce Lee and Man 2 was now 20 feet. Nancy Sinatra was now 260 feet from Sunset Boulevard. She could see the glow of the Sunset Boulevard streetlights ahead. She could see the faint neon of a gas station sign. She estimated she was 90 seconds from the intersection. She began to walk faster. Her pace increased to approximately 3.5 miles per hour. Her boot heels clicked faster. The rhythm changed. The men behind her adjusted their pace to match. The distance was now 20 feet. At 20 feet, most people begin to feel the geometry, not see it, feel it. Something enters the peripheral awareness that has no name. It is not sound. It is not sight. It is the weight of intention arriving before the body does. Nancy Sinatra felt it. Her shoulders rose by approximately 1/4 inch. Her jaw tightened. Her breathing shifted from her diaphragm to her chest, the way breathing shifts when the body prepares to move quickly. She was 190 feet from Sunset Boulevard. She began calculating. Could she run in 2-inch heels on concrete? How far was the gas station? Was there anyone at the intersection? Was anyone behind her close enough to grab her shoulder? She did not know the answer to the last question. The answer was yes. Man 1 was now 15 feet behind her, slightly to her left. Man 2 was 17 feet behind her, to her right. Bruce Lee was 12 feet behind Man 2. He could close 12 feet in approximately 0.9 seconds at a controlled sprint. He could close it in 0.6 seconds at maximum acceleration. He chose neither. He chose something else. He stopped walking. For exactly 2 seconds, Bruce Lee stood still on Vine Street, 30 feet behind Nancy Sinatra, 12 feet behind the 2 men, in the shadow between 2 buildings, where the broken streetlight created a dark patch, approximately 20 feet wide. He stood still because he was making a decision, not a physical decision, a moral one. He had no obligation to intervene. The woman ahead was a stranger. The 2 men behind her might be walking home. They might be heading to the same intersection. They might be harmless. The formation might be coincidence. The angle change might be nothing. Bruce Lee did not believe in coincidences when the geometry was wrong. He resumed walking. His speed was now 6 miles per hour. His steps were still silent. He was now 8 feet behind Man 2. At 8 feet, Bruce Lee could reach any part of Man 2's body in less than half a second. He could reach Man 1, who was 5 feet to the left and 3 feet ahead of Man 2, in approximately 0.7 seconds. Nancy Sinatra was now 140 feet from Sunset Boulevard. The footsteps behind her had stopped matching her rhythm. They were faster. She made a decision. She would not run. Running in heels on Vine Street at 11:37 p.m. would mean noise, instability, and a clear signal of fear. Fear invites pursuit. She had learned this not from a self-defense class, but from a lifetime of being Frank Sinatra's daughter in rooms full of men who measured women by what they could take from them. She kept walking, but she moved to the center of the sidewalk. She straightened her back. She kept her chin level. She made herself visible. She made herself a person who was walking with purpose, not a person who was running from something. 15 feet behind her, Man 1 moved his right hand from his side to his jacket pocket. The motion took approximately 0.8 seconds. Bruce Lee watched the hand enter the pocket, and catalogued the weight change. The jacket shifted by approximately 1 inch on the right side. Whatever was in that pocket weighed between 6 and 10 ounces. A wallet weighs 3 to 4 ounces. A folding knife weighs 5 to 8 ounces. Bruce Lee did not wait for the hand to come out of the pocket. He closed the remaining distance to man 2 in 2 steps. Each step covered approximately 4 feet. Total elapsed time, 0.6 seconds. He did not touch man 2. He walked past him, placing himself between the 2 men and the woman. He was now walking 6 feet behind Nancy Sinatra and 4 feet ahead of man 1. He did not look at man 1. He did not look at man 2. He looked straight ahead, at the back of Nancy Sinatra's head, at the cream blouse, at the white boots clicking on the concrete. Then he spoke, 2 words, loud enough for the 2 men to hear, calm enough that Nancy Sinatra would not be startled, specific enough that the men would understand exactly what was happening. Wrong street. The 2 words reached man 1 and man 2 at the same time. Man 1's hand froze inside his jacket pocket. Man 2 stopped walking. The voice had come from directly in front of them, from a figure they had not seen, had not heard, had not known was there, a figure that was now between them and the woman. Bruce Lee kept walking. He did not turn around. He did not slow down. Behind him, man 1 looked at man 2. Man 2 looked at man 1. There was a silence that lasted approximately 4 seconds. In that 4 seconds, both men ran a calculation. The calculation was simple. There were 2 of them and 1 of him. The man in front of them was 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed 135 pounds. They outweighed him by a combined 135 pounds. The calculation said they had the advantage. But the calculation did not account for what they had just experienced. They had not seen him arrive. They had not heard him approach. He had materialized in the space between them and the woman, as if the darkness had condensed into a human shape and decided to face them. And his voice, those 2 words, had carried no anger, no fear, no threat. It had carried certainty, the kind of certainty that does not negotiate. Man 1 removed his hand from his pocket. It was empty. Man 2 took 1 step backward, then another. Then they turned south on Vine Street and walked in the direction they had come from. Their formation dissolved. They walked side by side now, close together, shoulders almost touching, the way men walk when they are no longer hunting but retreating. Bruce Lee did not watch them leave. He was walking 6 feet behind Nancy Sinatra, matching her pace exactly, his flat-soled shoes silent on the concrete, his breathing steady at 4 breaths per minute, his heart rate settling back to 60 beats per minute. Nancy Sinatra heard the 2 words. She heard wrong street, spoken in a voice she did not recognize. She heard the footsteps behind her reduce from multiple to 1. She slowed by half a step. She turned her head to the right, just slightly, just enough to catch a shape in her peripheral vision. A man in black, walking behind her, looking straight ahead, making no effort to close the distance. She turned her head forward again. She kept walking. Sunset Boulevard was now 80 feet away. The gas station neon was clear. The intersection was lit. She could see a car passing on Sunset, then another. She was 30 seconds from safety. She did not speed up. She did not slow down. She walked at the same pace she had been walking since she left the studio. 3.5 miles per hour, her boots clicking on concrete, the dime in her left pocket, her right hand still free. At the corner of Vine and Sunset, under a working streetlight, Nancy Sinatra stopped walking. She turned around. Bruce Lee was standing 8 feet behind her. He had stopped when she stopped. His hands were at his sides. His posture was relaxed. His face was neutral. The light from the Sunset Boulevard street lamp fell on him fully for the first time, and Nancy Sinatra saw him clearly. 5 feet 7, lean, calm, eyes that were looking at her without any intent except to confirm that she was safe. She said, "Were those men following me?" Bruce Lee said, "They were." She said, "And you were following them." Bruce Lee said, "I was walking the same direction. They made it necessary for me to walk faster." She looked at his shoes, flat-soled, black. She looked at her boots, white, heeled. She said, "I didn't hear you." Bruce Lee said, "That was the point." Nancy Sinatra looked at Bruce Lee for approximately 3 seconds without speaking. 3 seconds is not a long time in a conversation. It is a long time when you are standing on a street corner at 11:39 p.m. with a stranger who just removed 2 men from your path without touching either of them. In 3 seconds, the human brain processes roughly 600 million neural signals. Nancy Sinatra's brain was processing one question: who is this man? She did not ask it. Not yet. Instead she said, "You said wrong street. What does that mean?" Bruce Lee said, "It means they chose the wrong street to walk down tonight." She said, "Because of me?" Bruce Lee said, "Because of what they intended to do on it." Nancy tilted her head. The gesture was slight, approximately 2 degrees to the left, the kind of tilt a person makes when they are not confused but recalibrating. She had grown up around dangerous men. Her father's world was filled with them. Men who carried favors the way other men carried wallets. Men who spoke softly because they never needed to shout. She had learned to read danger the way a sailor reads weather. And the man standing in front of her did not read like danger. He read like the absence of it. The kind of calm that exists only after a storm has been prevented. She said, "I'm Nancy." He said, "I know who you are." She said, "Because of my father." Bruce Lee said, "Because of your boots." She looked down at her white go-go boots. Then she looked at his flat black shoes. Then she did something that surprised her. She laughed. It was a short laugh, approximately 1.2 seconds, the kind of laugh that escapes before the brain can catch it. She had not laughed since arriving at the studio 10 hours ago. Bruce Lee did not laugh, but something shifted in his face. Not a smile, a softening. The muscles around his eyes relaxed by a fraction of a millimeter. It was the expression of a man who had just confirmed that the person in front of him was safe, both physically and emotionally. The operation was over. The rest was conversation. He said, "Do you have a ride home?" She said, "I have a dime and a payphone at that gas station." He said, "I have a car 2 blocks south. I can drive you to the payphone or I can drive you home. Either way, you should not be walking on Vine Street at this hour." She said, "Who are you?" He said, "My name is Bruce Lee. I teach martial arts. I live in Bel Air. I was visiting a sound engineer 2 doors from your studio. I am not someone you need to be afraid of." Nancy studied his face for approximately 4 seconds. She was looking for the thing she had been trained to look for since she was 15 years old, the micro-expression that reveals a lie, a slight asymmetry in the mouth, a flicker in the left eye, a tension in the jaw that does not match the words. She found none of it. His face was symmetrical, his eyes were steady, his jaw was relaxed. He was either telling the truth, or he was the most convincing liar she had ever met. She said, "The payphone." Bruce Lee nodded once. He turned and walked south on Vine Street. Nancy Sinatra walked beside him. Not behind him, beside him. She had made a second decision in the past 30 seconds. The first decision was to trust him enough to walk with him. The second decision was to not walk behind anyone for the rest of the night. They walked in silence for approximately 45 seconds. Their footsteps created an asymmetric rhythm on the pavement. Her boots, sharp and percussive, tap, 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 landing every 26 inches. His shoes, nearly inaudible, a whisper of rubber on concrete every 28 inches. She listened to the contrast the way a musician listens to syncopation. 2 rhythms. One announced itself, the other erased itself. She said, "How did you get between them and me without anyone hearing you?" Bruce Lee said, "I did not try to be quiet. I am quiet. There is a difference." She said, "What is the difference?" He said, "Trying to be quiet means you are controlling sound. Being quiet means sound has nothing to control. My shoes have flat soles, 3/16 of an inch thick. They have no heel to strike the pavement. My weight transfers from the ball of my foot to my toes. The surface area of contact is approximately 12 square inches at any given moment. The less surface that strikes, the less sound is produced. But the real reason is not the shoes, it is the intention. If your body intends to be noticed, it will be noticed. If your body intends to arrive, it simply arrives." Nancy was quiet for several steps. Then she said, "My boots are the opposite. They are designed to be heard." Bruce Lee said, "That is what makes them powerful, and that is what made tonight dangerous." She looked at him. "My boots made tonight dangerous?" He said, "Your boots announce you. Every step says, 'Here I am.' That announcement is a weapon when you are on a stage. It is an invitation when you are on a dark street." Nancy did not respond immediately. She walked 4 more steps. Then she said, "So you are saying my boots are the problem?" Bruce Lee said, "No, your boots are your identity. The problem is that the world does not always deserve to know where you are." They reached his car. It was a black 1966 Chrysler Imperial, parked on the east side of Vine Street between 2 meters that had expired hours ago. The car was 20 feet long, weighed approximately 4,800 pounds, and had a 440 cubic inch V8 engine. Bruce Lee opened the passenger door. Nancy Sinatra looked at the car, then at him. She got in. He walked around to the driver's side. He did not hurry. He moved at the same pace he had maintained the entire night. Deliberate, efficient, each step covering exactly the distance it needed to cover, and not 1 inch more. He opened his door, sat down, turned the ignition. The engine caught on the first try. He drove north on Vine, turned left on Sunset, and pulled into the gas station at the corner of Sunset and Cahuenga. The drive took 1 minute and 40 seconds. Neither of them spoke during it. The only sounds were the engine, the tires on asphalt, and the faint vibration of the heater, which Bruce Lee had turned on because the interior temperature was 54 degrees, and he had noticed Nancy cross her arms when she sat down. At the gas station, Nancy opened the door but did not get out. She sat with 1 boot on the asphalt and 1 boot in the car. She held the dime between her right thumb and index finger. She looked at the payphone which was mounted on the wall between the air pump and the restroom door. Then she looked at Bruce Lee. She said, "You teach martial arts?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Can you teach me what you did tonight?" He said, "I walked between 2 men and said 2 words. There is nothing to teach." She said, "That is not what I mean. Can you teach me to not be afraid when I hear footsteps behind me?" Bruce Lee turned off the engine. The silence was immediate. The gas station fluorescent lights hummed at 60 hertz. A car passed on Sunset, then another, then silence again. He said, "I cannot teach you to not be afraid. Fear is a signal. It is the body's way of saying that the geometry has changed. Fear told you tonight that 2 men were closing the distance. Fear moved your handbag from your right hand to your left, so your dominant hand was free. Fear straightened your back and leveled your chin, so you looked like a person with purpose rather than a target. Fear kept you alive tonight. I would not remove it," Nancy said. "Then what can you teach me?" Bruce Lee said, "I can teach you what to do in the 3 seconds after fear arrives. Fear takes 1 second to register. Most people spend the next 2 seconds freezing, fleeing, or hoping the situation resolves itself. I can teach you to use those 2 seconds differently." She said, "How?" He said, "By giving you 1 technique, not 12, not a system, 1. Something your body can execute without your mind's permission, something that becomes reflex." Nancy looked at the payphone, then she looked at the dime, then she put the dime back in her pocket. She pulled her boot back into the car and closed the door. She said, "Show me." Bruce Lee paused for approximately 2 seconds. Then he said, "Not in the car." He opened his door and stepped out. Nancy opened her door and stepped out. They stood in the gas station parking lot under fluorescent light at 11:47 p.m. on November 14th, 1967, in Hollywood, California. The lot was empty. The attendant was inside the booth, reading a newspaper. A German shepherd was sleeping against the wall near the air pump. Bruce Lee stood facing Nancy, at a distance of approximately 4 feet. He said, "If a man grabs your wrist, your shoulder, or your arm, what is your instinct?" Nancy said, "Pull away." He said, "That is the wrong instinct. Pulling away uses your bicep, which generates approximately 12 to 15 pounds of force in most women your size. The man who grabs you will be using his grip, which generates approximately 60 to 80 pounds of force. You are fighting his strongest muscle with your weakest motion. You will lose every time." Nancy said, "Then what do I do?" Bruce Lee said, "You do not pull, you strike. Not his hand, not his arm, his sternum." He placed his right hand flat against his own chest, fingers together, centered on the breastbone, 2 inches below the notch where the collarbones meet. "Here," he said, "the sternum is 4 to 7 inches long, approximately 1 inch wide, and sits directly in front of the heart. A palm heel strike to the sternum does 3 things. It disrupts the vagus nerve, which runs behind the sternum and controls heart rhythm. It compresses the thoracic cavity, which forces air out of the lungs, and it activates the solar plexus reflex, which causes an involuntary forward fold at the waist. The man who grabbed you will release his grip, not because he chose to, but because his nervous system overrides his decision." Nancy said, "A palm heel strike." Bruce Lee said, "Open your hand, fingers together, thumb tucked. Curl your fingers slightly so the heel of your palm, the thick pad at the base, becomes the striking surface. The contact area is approximately 2 square inches. The force is concentrated. This is not a slap. A slap distributes energy across the fingers, the palm, the wrist. A palm heel strike focuses energy through one point." He demonstrated. He held his right hand open, fingers together, wrist locked at approximately 15 degrees of extension, and drove his palm forward in a straight line from his center mass to an imaginary target at chest height. The motion covered approximately 14 inches. It took less than 1/10 of a second. The air moved. He said, "Your body weight is 125 pounds. If you drive this strike from your rear foot, through your hip, through your shoulder, through your palm, you will generate approximately 250 to 300 pounds of peak force over a contact time of 15 to 20 milliseconds. That is enough to fold any man at the waist regardless of his size." Nancy stared at his hand. She said, "How do I practice?" Bruce Lee took one step to his left. He positioned himself beside her, facing the same direction. He said, "Mirror me." Nancy opened her right hand, fingers together, thumb tucked. She curled her fingers slightly. Bruce Lee looked at her hand. He reached over and adjusted her wrist angle by approximately 5 degrees. He said, "Lock the wrist. If the wrist is loose, the force goes into your own joint. If the wrist is locked, the force goes through the target." She locked her wrist. He said, "Now, step forward with your left foot, 6 inches. As the foot lands, rotate your right hip forward, 15 degrees. As the hip rotates, extend your arm." The arm is the last thing that moves. Foot, hip, arm, in that order. The power does not come from the arm. The power comes from the ground. Nancy stepped forward. She rotated her hip. She extended her arm. The strike was slow, approximately half a second. Bruce Lee watched every joint. He said, "Again." She did it again, faster, approximately 0.4 seconds. He said, "Again." She did it again, approximately 0.3 seconds. He said, "Again." Do not think about the steps. Your body heard them once. Let it remember. She did it again. This time, something changed. The movement lost its segmentation. The foot, the hip, the arm stopped being 3 separate actions and became one continuous motion. The palm shot forward in a line that started at the ball of her left foot and ended 2 inches in front of an imaginary chest. The air moved. The German shepherd near the air pump opened one eye, looked at them, and closed it. Bruce Lee said, "That is the one." Nancy said, "That is the one what?" He said, "That is the repetition your body will remember, the one that felt different from the others." Every technique has a moment when the body stops translating and starts speaking. That repetition was yours. They practiced for 15 minutes, 30 repetitions total. Bruce Lee did not count them aloud. He counted them internally. On repetitions 1 through 7, the motion was mechanical. On repetitions 8 through 14, the motion smoothed, but the power was inconsistent. On repetitions 15 through 22, the foot-hip-arm chain linked properly on 6 out of 8 attempts. On repetitions 23 through 30, the chain linked every time. Her peak force, based on Bruce Lee's visual assessment of acceleration and body mechanics, had increased from an estimated 120 pounds on repetition 1 to approximately 270 pounds on repetition 30. After the 30th repetition, Bruce Lee held up one hand. She stopped. He said, "If a man grabs you, do not pull away. Step into him. Drive this strike into his sternum. Do not aim for his face. Faces have bone, angles, and they move. The sternum is large, centered, and it does not dodge. Hit it once. You will not need to hit it twice." Nancy looked at her right hand. The heel of her palm was slightly pink from the repeated impact against the air. She opened and closed her hand twice. She said, "Why this one? Why not a kick or an elbow or something else?" Bruce Lee said, "Because this one requires no flexibility, no reach advantage, no special footwear, and no room to wind up. You can execute it in a hallway, an elevator, a parking lot, or a sidewalk on Vine Street at 11:35 p.m. It works in heels. It works barefoot. It works when you are grabbed. It works when you are scared. The best technique is the one that works when everything else has failed." Nancy Sinatra looked at him. She said, "My father knows men who solve problems differently." Bruce Lee said, "Your father's men solve problems with what they carry. I am teaching you to solve problems with what you are." The gas station fluorescent lights hummed. A car passed on Sunset. The attendant turned a page in his newspaper. The German shepherd adjusted its position against the wall. Nancy walked to the payphone. She picked up the receiver, inserted the dime and dialed. The phone rang 3 times. Eddie answered. She said, "Corner of Sunset and Cahuenga, the gas station. 10 minutes. She hung up. She walked back to where Bruce Lee was standing beside his car. She said, "I have one more question." He said, "Ask it." She said, "When you walked between those men and me tonight, were you afraid?" Bruce Lee was quiet for approximately 4 seconds. He looked at the street, then at her. He said, "Fear and I have an agreement. It arrives. It delivers its message. Then it leaves. Tonight it arrived at approximately 11:34 p.m. when I saw the formation tighten. It told me the geometry was wrong. It left at approximately 11:34 and 2 seconds when I decided what to do." Nancy said, "2 seconds." Bruce Lee said, "2 seconds is enough. You had 2 seconds tonight as well. You moved your bag from your right hand to your left. You straightened your posture. You refused to run. You used your 2 seconds perfectly. The only difference between tonight and every night from now on is that now you have something in your right hand." Nancy looked down at her right hand. She opened it. The palm was still pink. She closed it into the position Bruce Lee had shown her. Fingers together, thumb tucked, wrist locked, heel of palm forward. She held it for 3 seconds. Then she relaxed it. She said, "These boots are made for walking." Bruce Lee said, "Now your hands are made for what happens when walking is not enough." Eddie's car appeared on Sunset Boulevard at 11:58 p.m. A black 1965 Lincoln Continental, license plate California 437, BRD. Eddie pulled into the gas station and stopped. He saw Nancy standing beside a black Chrysler Imperial next to a man he did not recognize. Eddie was 61 years old, 6 feet 1 inch, 210 pounds, and had been in the presence of enough dangerous men to recognize one. He looked at Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee looked back at him with the same neutral expression he had worn all night. Nancy walked to Eddie's car. She opened the back door. Before she got in, she turned. She said, "Bruce." He said, "Yes." She said, "Thank you for walking faster." He said, "Thank you for not running." Nancy Sinatra got in the car. Eddie pulled out of the gas station, turned right on Sunset Boulevard, and drove west toward her home in Bel Air. Bruce Lee watched the taillights until they disappeared past La Brea. He walked back to his Chrysler Imperial. He sat in the driver's seat. He did not start the engine. He reached into the glove compartment and removed a small notebook, 5 inches by 3 inches, black leather cover, filled approximately 2/3 with handwriting in a mixture of English and Chinese characters. He opened it to the next blank page. He wrote 7 words. "Forward reaches the destination. Through reaches behind." He closed the notebook. He started the engine. He drove south on Vine Street, past the recording studio where Nancy had spent 10 hours, past the rain check room where the 2 men had been drinking, past the dark patch between 2 buildings where the broken street light still had not been fixed. The street was empty now. No footsteps, no formation, no white boots clicking on concrete. Just the sound of a 440 cubic inch engine moving through Hollywood at 32 miles per hour, carrying a man who weighed 135 pounds and had changed the way a woman walked through the world without ever raising his fist. 3 months after that night, in February of 1968, Nancy Sinatra was at a rehearsal for a television special on the NBC lot in Burbank. A producer, whose name she never disclosed publicly, walked up behind her, placed his hand on her lower back, and leaned in to whisper something in her ear. His fingers pressed into the fabric of her blouse. His body was 12 inches from hers. His breath was on her neck. Nancy Sinatra did not pull away. She did not call for help. She did not freeze. She stepped into him. She drove the heel of her right palm into his sternum with a motion that traveled 14 inches in less than 2/10 of a second, generating approximately 260 pounds of peak force over 18 milliseconds. The producer folded at the waist. He dropped to one knee. His hand left her back. His breath left his lungs. He looked up at her from the floor with an expression that she later described to a friend as the look a man makes when he realizes the rules have changed and nobody told him. Nancy Sinatra looked down at him. She said nothing. She straightened her blouse. She turned and walked back to the rehearsal stage. Her boots clicked on the studio floor. Sharp, percussive, announced. The producer never touched her again. He never touched anyone on that lot again. Not because he was afraid of consequences from a network or a union or a lawyer, because he was afraid of a pair of hands that belonged to a woman who weighed 125 pounds and had learned, in a gas station parking lot on a Tuesday night, that forward reaches the destination, but through reaches the part the other person was protecting.